May your day and really the entire week ahead of you be deeply blessed.
Yes, absolutely.
Welcome to the deep dive. So I want you to imagine pretty much the most toxic, destructive breakup in human history.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like, we're talking about a scenario where, instead of just keying an ex's car or something, the jilted lover decides to completely obliterate the regional economy of an occupying superpower.
Right. And doing it using, what, 300 burning jackals?
Exactly. It's such an incredible visual, and it sets the stage perfectly for what we are looking at today.
It really does. It's so chaotic.
We have a really fascinating stack of source material in front of us today. We're pulling excerpts and study notes from both the Holman and the NWA study Bibles.
Yeah, specifically focusing on Judges chapter 15.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive is to basically strip away the polished, heavily sanitized Sunday school version of Samson that a lot of you might know.
Yeah, because normally when we hear that name, we just think of this pristine hero, right?
Yeah, like a guy with long hair who fights the bad guys with superhuman strength.
Exactly. But when you actually dig into these study notes, that heroic image just entirely shatters.
It totally does. We are looking at a chaotic, hyperviolent narrative that's driven almost entirely by ego.
Yeah, the historical and cultural context in these study materials, it paints a picture of a man who is incredibly gifted, sure, but profoundly stunted in his emotional and spiritual maturity.
Right.
I mean, he is supposed to be a judge, a deliverer appointed by God to lead Israel, but as the notes highlight, he rarely acts out of any sort of divine purpose.
Right. He's just out for himself. So let's get into the mechanics of how this chaos actually starts, because the inciting incident for this whole chapter is a rejected peace offering.
Yeah, and it spirals out of control with terrifying speed.
It really does.
Yeah.
So to understand the escalation, we have to look at the cultural stakes here.
Exactly. So the text tells us Samson goes to visit his wife during the wheat harvest, and the Holman notes point out this would be around May, which is a crucial economic time.
And he brings a gift, right?
Yeah, he brings a young goat, which in the ancient Near East was this standard traditional gift of hospitality and reconciliation.
So he expects to just, walk right into her room with this goat. But he gets to the house, and his father-in-law literally barricades the door.
Right. He won't let him in. And the father-in-law's reasoning is completely detached from reality. Well, at least from Samson's perspective.
Wait, why did he lock him out?
Because of a previous, very intense conflict at their wedding, the father-in-law just assumes Samson despised the bride. So in Samson's absence, he simply gave her away in marriage to Samson's companion.
Oh my gosh, which is just a staggering relational betrayal.
It's huge.
And then, as if to throw gasoline on the fire, the father-in-law tries to smooth things over by offering her younger sister instead.
Right, arguing that she's prettier anyway, like that fixes it.
Wow, and that profound insult is basically the catalyst for everything that follows.
Exactly. Samson basically declares that this time he is completely justified in whatever he does to the Philistines. He views it as a blank check for vengeance.
He absolutely does, and he cashes it in the most destructive way possible.
He goes out and captures 300 foxes. Or, well, the study notes clarify this, and it fundamentally changes how you visualize the scene.
Yeah, they were highly likely jackals, not foxes.
Which is such a crazy detail. Why does the distinction matter so much?
Well, it's vital for the logistics of it. Foxes are solitary creatures. Trying to trap 300 individual foxes would literally take months.
Right. That makes sense.
But jackals, on the other hand, are scavengers that hunt and live in large packs. So if you are trying to capture hundreds of animals quickly in the ancient Palestinian landscape, pack animals are significantly easier to round up.
That makes so much more sense. So he rounds up 300 jackals, he ties them tail to tail in pairs, wedges a torch between their tails, lights it, and releases these panicked, burning animals into the Philistine crops.
It's just horrific.
Yeah.
And he doesn't just burn the standing wheat. The text specifies he destroys the vineyards and the olive groves too. He is deliberately wiping out the agricultural triad of the ancient Mediterranean economy, right? Grain, wine, and oil.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is not just property damage. It is domestic terrorism that threatens the entire food supply and economic stability of the whole region.
Now, I want to challenge your framing of this for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
We're calling it personal vengeance and domestic terrorism. But, Samson is a judge of Israel, raised up to combat the Philistines, who are an oppressive, occupying force.
Right.
So doesn't the sheer scale of this destruction imply some kind of calculated, asymmetric military strategy? Like, isn't this just unconventional warfare?
It is really tempting to read it that way, but the Holman notes explicitly caution against doing that.
Oh, really? Wonder.
Because if we look at his motives, Samson isn't executing a military strategy to free the Israelites. He never consults God, he never rallies an army, and he never claims to be acting for his nation.
Okay, so it really is just him lashing out.
Yeah, he is acting solely out of a bruised ego.
Yeah.
And the Philistines' response confirms they view it as an interpersonal feud, not an active war by Israel.
How so?
Well, they don't mobilize their army to attack Israelite cities. They go straight to the source of the drama.
Right, they march straight to the father-in-law's house.
Exactly. And they retaliate by burning Samson's wife and his father-in-law alive.
Which is horrific.
Yeah.
Especially considering that in the previous chapter, the wife betrayed Samson's secret, specifically because the Philistines threatened to burn her and her father's house down.
Yeah, she compromised her marriage to avoid the fire, and she ends up dying by fire anyway. It is a really dark, tragic irony.
And Samson's response to their murder is just pure, unadulterated carnage. The text says he slaughtered them, striking them hip and thigh.
Right.
I read that note in the NAA Study Bible. It mentions that hip and thigh is an obscure Hebrew idiom. What exactly does that look like on the ground?
So scholars suggest it likely originates from Greco-Roman wrestling terminology. It refers to an attack that completely takes out an opponent's base.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, metaphorically, it translates to a ruthless, overwhelming slaughter. There are no tactics involved here. It's basically tearing people limb from limb using sheer brute force.
Just a total bloodbath.
Exactly. The notes make it abundantly clear that Samson is operating as a one-man wrecking crew, completely outside of any national or spiritual interest.
So Samson wages unilateral economic warfare and commits a mass slaughter. Logically, you would think the oppressed Israelites would look at this and say, finally, we have a weapon of mass destruction on our side.
You'd think they would mobilize, right?
Right, let's throw off our oppressors. But their reaction is sheer terror instead.
It is arguably one of the most impressive psychological moments in the entire book of Judges.
The Philistines march up into the territory of Judah to demand answers. In response, the men of Judah gather 3,000 armed men.
A massive force.
Yeah, and they march down to a place called the Rock of Edom, where Samson is hiding in a cave. But they are not there to join his rebellion.
No, not at all. They are there to serve a warrant.
Yeah, 3,000 men of Judah march out to arrest one man, their own champion.
It's wild. The dialogue between them is staggering, too. The men of Judah ask Samson, "Don't you know the Philistines rule over us? What have you done to us?"
Like, they are mad at him.
Exactly. And then they proceed to tie him up with 2 brand new ropes to hand him over to the enemy.
It feels like the entire nation has a profound case of Stockholm Syndrome.
That's a great way to put it.
I mean, they have a superhuman asset sitting right in front of them, and they'd rather tie him up than fight for their own freedom. Why would they do that?
That interaction reveals a massive leadership vacuum on both sides, which the Holman notes dissect brilliantly.
What do the notes say?
They point out that the men of Judah show absolutely zero desire for liberation. They have grown completely accustomed to their oppression.
Right, they just want things to stay quiet.
Yeah, they do not want a revolution. They want to appease their captors to maintain a comfortable, predictable status quo.
They are completely terrified of the disruption that freedom would require.
Precisely. And on the flip side, you have Samson, who is failing utterly as a judge.
Because a biblical judge is supposed to inspire the people, right?
Exactly. They are supposed to cast a vision for a free Israel and lead the armies of the Lord into battle. Samson does none of that.
He's just causing trouble for himself.
Right. He isn't inspiring anyone. He's just drawing enemy fire through his own selfish behavior. He has become such a liability that his own people negotiate his surrender.
And Samson actually complies. He just makes the 3,000 men swear they won't execute him themselves. And then he lets them bind him with these new ropes and march him over to the Philistines.
It really looks like he has entirely given up at this point.
But the study materials point out that this surrender is actually the setup for his most famous military victory.
Yeah, this is the iconic image of Samson that has survived through history, though the details are much more brutal than the children's books imply.
For sure. So they bring him to a place called Lehi. The Philistines come out shouting in triumph, thinking they finally have him secured.
But the text explicitly notes that the Spirit of the Lord comes powerfully upon Samson.
And those 2 brand new heavy-duty ropes simply melt off his arms like flax burned in a fire. The bindings just dissolve.
The shift from total captivity to explosive freedom happens in an instant. It's incredibly cinematic.
And he needs a weapon immediately, right? He looks around and finds the jawbone of a donkey.
Yes, and the study materials place heavy emphasis on the fact that this was a fresh jawbone.
That's such a weird detail. Why does the moisture content of a random bone matter so much in this context?
Well, the physical condition of the bone dictates whether he lives or dies here.
Really?
Yeah, an old, sun-bleached bone lying in the dirt would be calcified, dry, and brittle. If you strike an armored soldier with a dry bone, it just shatters on the first impact.
Ah, okay.
But a fresh jawbone one from an animal that has very recently died still contains moisture and marrow. It is incredibly dense, heavy, and won't break easily.
So it essentially functions as a lethal bioorganic club, and he uses that dense club to kill 1,000 Philistine men. I mean, just try to fathom the sheer physical exertion of that.
That's almost unimaginable.
One man, one improvised weapon, 1,000 casualties. It is a slaughter of unimaginable proportion.
Yeah, it is. But what happens immediately after the adrenaline fades is what the study notes really zero in on.
Right. Samson stands among this mountain of bodies and composes a victory poem.
A poem that reveals exactly where his heart is.
So he recites, "With a donkey's jawbone, a heap, two heaps. With a donkey's jawbone, I killed 1,000 men."
And in the original Hebrew, it is actually a very clever phonetic pun. The word for donkey and the word for heek sound nearly identical.
Oh, wow. So he is playing with language.
He is, but there is a massive theological irony here that completely undercuts his cleverness.
Right, because Samson is a Nazirite.
Exactly.
And according to the Book of Numbers, taking a Nazirite vow
Yeah.
means adhering to strict spiritual rules. No cutting your hair, no drinking alcohol, and absolutely no touching dead carcasses.
Right, the purity laws were very strict.
Yet Samson literally digs through the rotting carcass of a donkey to rip out a jawbone to secure his victory. He routinely ignores his spiritual commitments whenever it is practically convenient for him.
And the emphasis on the jawbone being fresh highlights that violation perfectly.
How so?
Because he is actively defiling himself to grab a weapon, completely disregarding the holiness his vow requires. It's a fresh, bloody carcass.
Man. It reminds me of watching modern professional athletes,
How do you mean?
Well, after a massive play or a championship win, you frequently see athletes pointing to the sky, acknowledging a higher power, or thanking God in the post-game interview.
Right, yeah.
But look at Samson's poem. It is entirely self-referential. With a donkey's jawbone, I killed 1,000 men. He doesn't mention God once.
That's a great point. And the expert notes from the Holman Bible draw a devastating contrast to emphasize exactly that.
Oh, what do they compare it to?
They compare Samson's boastful little rhyme to the Song of Deborah found earlier in Judges chapter 5.
Okay.
After Deborah and Barak achieve a massive military victory, Deborah sings a sprawling, beautiful song that repeatedly deflects the praise upward, giving all the glory to God for delivering Israel.
She recognizes who actually won the battle.
Exactly. Samson recognizes only himself. He attributes a supernatural victory entirely to his own physical prowess and a donkey bone.
Wow.
And to make matters worse, the text notes he names the battlefield Ramath Lehi, which translates to Hill of the Jawbone.
So he builds a geographic monument to his own physical feat.
Yes. He has already forgotten that just moments before, it was the Spirit of the Lord that miraculously melted the ropes off his wrists.
It's a profound tragedy, really. He is standing at the absolute zenith of his physical dominance, top a literal hill of his enemies, and he is entirely blind to the true source of his power.
Entirely blind.
But the narrative doesn't let him stay on that high for long, because right after boasting about his unbeatable strength, Samson is violently humbled by basic human frailty.
Yeah, the physical toll of killing 1,000 men in hand-to-hand combat finally hits him.
He becomes desperately, mortally thirsty. He feels like he is going to die of dehydration right there on the battlefield.
Right.
And for the very first time in this entire chapter, he finally speaks to God. He cries out, "You have given your servant this great salvation. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?"
Notice the sudden, dramatic shift in his vocabulary there.
Yeah, totally.
When he is invincible, it's, "I killed 1,000 men." When he is on the verge of death, suddenly he remembers Orthodox theology and refers to himself as your servant.
I couldn't help but compare it to like a teenager who completely ghosts their parents.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
They won't text back. They act like they rule the world until they run out of gas on the side of the highway
Yeah.
and realize they don't have a credit card.
Yes.
Then suddenly they're calling home saying, "I love you so much, please help me." Like, is Samson experiencing a moment of genuine spiritual awakening here? Or is this just a transactional plea from a desperate man?
The study notes lean heavily toward it being transactional, and they point out a fascinating parallel that gives this moment incredible depth.
Oh, what's the parallel?
The commentators suggest that Samson perfectly mirrors the spiritual state of the entire nation of Israel.
How does he mirror the whole nation?
Think back to the Exodus generation in the desert, specifically in Exodus 17.
Okay.
The Israelites would experience a massive, miraculous deliverance by God, like crossing the Red Sea, and almost immediately afterward, they would panic and accuse God of abandoning them just because they were thirsty.
Wow. Yeah, that's spot on.
Like Israel, Samson only acknowledges God in moments of severe affliction. It is a crisis mode religion. When things are going well, God completely vanishes from their minds.
But despite the transactional nature of the prayer, God actually answers him.
He does, yeah.
He graciously splits open a hollow place in Lehi, and a spring of water flows out. Samson drinks, his strength returns, and his spirit revives.
It is a moment of unmerited grace. But the true state of Samson's heart is immediately revealed by what he does the second he feels better.
Right, because he decides to name this spring.
Yes. He names the miraculous water source En-Hakkor, which translates to...
Spring of the caller.
Right, not spring of the provider, not spring of the Lord's deliverance.
Wow.
Even in a moment of utter desperation, where his life was saved exclusively by divine intervention, his ego finds a way to center himself. He names the miracle after his own act of calling out.
The narcissism is just staggering.
It is deeply ingrained. And the NWA Study Bible actually provides a fascinating structural tool to help readers track this spiritual decay.
Oh, what do they provide?
They include a chart outlining the 10 feats of Samson across his life, and it splits his narrative into two distinct halves.
Okay.
In the earlier victories, including the melting of the ropes, the text explicitly credits the divine. It repeatedly uses the phrase, "The Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him."
Giving credit where credit is due.
Exactly, but as you move down the chart to his later feats, that phrase completely disappears. The divine credit vanishes from the text.
That's chilling.
It really is. It marks a tragic, invisible shift where Samson begins to believe his own press. He operates under the delusion that his physical strength is inherent to him, rather than a temporary empowerment from the Spirit of the Lord.
So the chart physically maps out his theological decline. The incredible feats keep happening, but the presence of God is no longer acknowledged.
Precisely.
And that brings us to a really peculiar detail at the very end of this chapter. The study notes highlight a concluding sentence that feels out of place.
Yes, the text reads, "He judged Israel in the days of the Philistines 20 years.
Now, that specific phrasing is highly significant in the book of Judges, isn't it?
It is. A formula like, "and the land had rest for X years," or "he judged Israel for X years," is almost universally the historical period at the end of a judge's story. It is the narrative signal that their era has concluded.
But for Samson, this isn't the end of his story. We still have chapter 16, with Delilah and the collapse of the temple looming ahead.
Exactly. And the commentators suggest this is intentional.
In what way?
Because Samson operated entirely on his own strength and ego, his story isn't allowed to end with that neat, triumphant summary.
Ah, I see.
His failure to fulfill his divine mandate means his narrative drags on into a disastrous final chapter. That 20-year marker isn't a celebration of a successful, peaceful reign. It is a pregnant pause. It's a warning before the inevitable collapse.
It's like looking at an X-ray of a shattered bone, but the patient insists they feel fine and are still going to run a marathon.
Yes.
You just know a catastrophic failure is imminent. We've spent this entire deep dive unpacking a man who had every conceivable advantage, unmatched physical strength, and a direct divine calling, but who was ultimately undone because he couldn't see past his own reflection.
He took supernatural gifts and weaponized them to settle petty interpersonal scores. He missed the entire point of his existence. He was called to be a liberator, but he settled for being just another agent of chaos in a broken world.
Which brings us to a final thought I want to leave you, our listener, with today. It is very easy for us to sit back and critique Samson's massive ego and his failure to liberate his people.
Very easy, yeah.
But I want to turn our attention back to those 3,000 men of Judah for a moment. They had an army. They had a champion. They could have fought for their freedom.
But they didn't.
Right. Instead, they chose to arrest their only hope because they were terrified of angering their oppressors. So the question for you to mull over is this. Do we suffer from a modern Judah complex?
That's a heavy question.
How often in our own lives, our careers or our communities, do we choose to endure a toxic, oppressive status quo simply because the fight for something better feels too messy or too disruptive? Are we trading the terrifying prospect of actual freedom for the familiar comfort of our own captivity?
It is a deeply uncomfortable question, but an essential one if we want to actually learn from the failures recorded in these texts.
It absolutely is.
Well,
Thank you for joining us today as we navigated the complex, challenging realities hidden within this story. We love unpacking these deep dives with you.
it was a great discussion.
As we wrap up, just as we started, we want to leave you with this. God blesses all the listeners. Take care of yourselves, everyone. We will see you next time on The Deep Dive.